Hello, Melonya. How are you?
Mm.
Woo! It's
You know what? It's Friday.
Friday.
Happy Friday. Welcome to MT Fridays. My name is Melonya and you are
Tahitia, and
and
we are here.
yeah, we're filling the brain drain one conversation at a time. We get together every Friday to discuss what's ever on our mind, what's trending. And so today's topic, because I don't know about anybody else, but I have been feeling when you said, "How are you?" This week I've been asking myself, should I stop asking people that?
Ooh.
Because when people ask me, "How am I?" My automatic is, I'm good. How about you? But I'm really not good. And I don't like to lie. But with all of that being said, I think that, it's easy during this time for us to feel disconnected. So today I want to talk about community and
Ah.
building community and just some efforts I'm making in terms of what may need to be happening in our communities during this time. So that's what I'm bringing to the table today.
Well, I love that. I love that for this beautiful Friday. I want to talk about, and I told you right before we jumped in that I didn't really have much, but I do have something. I want to talk a little bit about communication and just like how we receive communication, and we're getting so much right now that I think it kind of leans into that like sense of community that we have. But let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. You know, so I, one of the things that I really pay attention to news, not well, and not cable news. I'm not a cable news watcher, but information. Let me put it that way. I really pay attention to information. And I know that in the outside world there is there protests going on, right? But you're not really seeing that, in our news feeds. You're just not seeing it. And so during this time, I think it becomes, while we're being inundated with a lot of information, and for some people they're excited by it, but for other people they're alarmed by it. But there might be a sense of isolation, and that things are not happening, or there's no movement, and there is. But I think one of the things that is going to be, I think what is happening now is an opportunity for those people who have a different vision for what life in the world can be, to start building that despite what is going on right now. And so I think one of the first things, and when I do my other podcast, I talk about personal sovereignty. I talk about getting ourselves together, taking care of our families, our local world, moving to the national, and then moving to the international. And so I'm starting with my family. I think we need to make certain that we are in communication and working together and building community within our families. And some people have very tight knit families, others don't. But I think there are some things and some discussions that need to be had within families to make certain that they are safe, that they are building community wherever they live, right? Because people's families can be, all over the place in this country. That we are aware collectively of what's going on and how some of these things are impacting us in different states and different areas, and some things that we need to do in order to survive this. And so my family used to, on my father's side, they would have, a Zoom meeting or whatever. And I found them a little difficult because there was never really an agenda. And I'm thinking, we have resources here and nobody's sharing information. And you got old people trying to figure out the technology and right. And so I kind of took a back seat, and then they were late on Sundays. And I'm like, I got to get up in the morning. But, I reached out to that person who started that, and she has been really instrumental in sharing information about our family history and our family tree. And I said, I think it's time for us to have a family meeting, and I'll set the agenda. And then I stopped to think about it, and I thought about my mom's side of the family, right? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to share that agenda with them. And then I thought about my favorite aunt who passed away, and her family, and she's my aunt by marriage. And I was like, well, I'm going to share that agenda with them. So there's some agenda items that we're working on. Well, that we're going to be discussing. But one of the things in terms of community, and one of the things that we need to think about in our world today is our food sources. And I talked to you about getting, growing little gardens and things of that nature, but making certain that you have, your food secure, because I think that's going to be an issue. Um, making sure that you are connected.
So I just want to pause you for a second because you've laid out a
Okay.
bunch of stuff already. And so I just
Yeah,
want to pause you for a second and
go
just
ahead.
check in for anyone who's watching. So Melania's talking about communication and like how do we communicate in these trying times. And so it sounds like you're talking about like the roots starting at the family and then branching out, right?
Absolutely.
And so, but I'm gonna pause you because I have this burning question, which is how are you tackling the fact that sometimes when family gets together, it's for joy, right, and entertainment, and sometimes when you bring concepts like like energy towards action or agendas towards action or agendas towards how are you gonna manage through these times, it's like, oh, why are you like you're bringing down times, like are you encountering any of that as you
We haven't
engage
met yet.
with
We're just in the
okay,
planning
okay.
stage. We haven't, but here's the thing. I don't have time for people who want to be asleep. Because if you want to be asleep, this ain't the time. So go ahead and be sleepy on your own. But I think as a person that really works to stay informed and to get factual information and to connect the dots, I'm going to make certain that my family understands what that information is and how those dots are connecting and how it's going to impact them. What they do with that information is on them. And this is really an interesting point for me because I'm not particularly close with my family, right? I mean, I'm a lone star. I'm a loner. I'm a loner. But here's the thing. I love my family and I want to see them prosper and survive past this. And as an African American, I'm tired of us trying to just survive. So I think this is an opportunity as people of color collectively, if we decide to work together, it is an opportunity for us to stop just surviving in the United States and figuring out a way to thrive. And it starts first with family. It then starts with building community and being active and involved in your community. It also means attaching yourselves to national causes and having those numbers, and then looking around internationally and how you can support international organizations and causes that represent the people all throughout this world. Because really, in reality, people throughout this world are really under attack. They might not know it yet, or maybe they do. Maybe we're the last to know, to come to the party. But those are the kind of conversations that I'm starting to generate. um, I want them to be all aware that on February 28th there's an economic blackout that is being called nationally.
Which is a great call in because I believe the 28th is a Friday, right? So I was even going to say to you, do we even want to do this podcast next Friday? Because technically, if you're really doing an economic blackout, this would be one of those sources, platforms, places where people do earn money. Is it a complete blackout? I know some people are doing returns on that day, like they're saving all their returns and doing returns on the 28th. But It's interesting where we get our information and how we share and exchange information, like the communication piece, because I was going to talk a little bit about how we communicate these things. Like, is it via messages? Like, when we're feeling burned out, do we not have phone calls with family, but do we text everyone just to be like, hey, I want to check in with you, just make sure you're okay? Or are we so inundated with information right now, it's even hard to communicate? Because sometimes I will find myself and I've like talking to family members or talking with friends, and like I don't have the energy to explain something that would be important to kind of go into detail with, because we get our information from different places, yet we all assume we're getting it from the same place, right?
Mm-mm.
Um,
I
well,
don't
I
think
think we
so.
do.
I
Like
don't.
my mom, my well, my parents will say to me, or someone will say to me, well, I saw it on Instagram, and you have Instagram or you have Facebook or you have LinkedIn, right? But I think we often forget the algorithms for each of us is very individual. I just because like it used to be, you used to watch like the CBS channel, the news, or NBC, and you watch the news, you got the same news, right? Like you watched that show, you got the same news. So sometimes when a family member or friend will say, "Oh, I saw it on Facebook. Didn't you see it on Facebook?" We don't have the same algorithm. So I think there's also some, and you talked about this before, some misinformation and some misunderstanding about, well, what you're seeing on social media too. Not, I don't know if it's necessarily with all generations, but I know there's probably a little bit of like, because I'll hear my older relatives talk about social media stations or platforms as if they are TV stations. Like I saw it on the Facebook, I saw it on the Instagram. Like, do you know what I'm getting at when I say that, right? Like we're all getting that same stream of information, but my stream of information is markedly different from anybody else out there because it's so customized to advertise to us. So social media is probably the worst way to get our information. Um, it also like and so I've talked about this before with you. It has a bunch of ads too that are so marketed towards you. So maybe you get a nice nugget of information, and then you get like 4 ads that are so targeted towards you, they're distracting to the information that you might have received on your algorithm. So, but the family piece is so important. Because family does influence us in a variety of ways, whether that's our found family or our family of origin. And I love the idea of family meetings. So, when is the family meeting?
You know what we're planning? I think she's going to put something together for the sixth, and I'm putting the agenda together. Some years ago, when I lived in New York, a friend asked me to do a catering gig for her because she couldn't do it, and I said yes, and it was for the Kennedys family meeting. So they have a family meeting, and I was there, ready to
Was
serve
that at the
breakfast.
Kennedy Center?
No,
No.
no, it was not at the Kennedy Center, but they,
You
they
can't
were
go
very,
there anymore.
no, they were a very nice group of people, but it stuck with me that because they have businesses and whatnot. But you know what, family, we have some business to take care of too, and I think nobody really knows what the future is going to hold. But we do know this: it's going to be painful. Unfortunately, they've warned us. They said, "Well, you're going to feel some pain." The president said that. Musk said that. People are feeling the pain. Farmers are feeling the pain. Folks are feeling the pain, right? And so your family is maybe the source that's going to keep you afloat, right? It
Which
may.
is I'll throw a radically out there idea, right? Maybe this is, if people have the ability, the opportunity to get, and I hate to say people should get more insular with their family, but I almost wish like more families got together and bought like big plots of farmland and just like lived and decided to make their own towns. I've talked to you about that. Like, let's
Yes.
go buy some land and we'll just live. Anyone who wants to buy some land with me and live on a plot of land, and we'll just farm and we'll do creative things. We'll run around like a bad movie, but not a bad horror movie, I'm hoping. But I do think people should get together with their communities of similar mindsets to make it through the next I'm not even gonna say 4 years, the next of the coming lifetime. Because like, I don't know about anybody else, but this is our opportunity in a world of, like, individualism as we shift towards that, to just deciding we can do whatever we want to. Like, part of me is angry at the government shifts, but part of me also says, "Well, you have a government that sort of doesn't care about certain pieces of the law and says, like, this is what we're doing and we're doing it." And it's a very, like, sort of, we're gonna charge forward. But there's nothing that stops us from being big thinkers like that and getting together as groups and having big ideas and maybe deciding to live out our lives in a different way.
Absolutely.
I think it's gonna take people of similar mindsets getting together and making these teams of,
Community.
entrepreneur and community and kinship and deciding, "Okay, I don't like this, but we all like this thing together, and we know we can build towards this." And so my brother said something interesting to me. He said, "I watch all these" 'cause he's getting into, like, hobby farming. And he's like, "I watch all these videos that kind of imply it would be easy or not that hard for people to live in self-sustaining communities and not have to worry perhaps about the price of you have different things to worry about than prices when you live that way, but not so much have to worry about the loneliness and the, well, where will we find food?" Like, yes, it turns into a very, Little House on the Prairie if you don't have a good crop type of lifestyle. But, I do sort of imagine in my head a little bit, what would it be like to live in a community where, you're kind of friendly with everyone and everybody's working towards a common goal? That's what neighborhoods used to be very much like, with neighborhood gardens and check-ins on neighbors. I'm friendly with some of my neighbors, but not all my neighbors. It would be awesome to have like a a community garden in my backyard, but we don't function like that anymore. I think we have
Well,
more fear sometimes with neighbors
and
than love.
I think this is part of the reason why we're at this point in our history now, because this rugged individualism, right? Individualism, and again, I'm gonna go back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? We are taught to first we're interdependent, then we're taught to be independent, and we stop there, right? We stop at independent. But the thing that comes after independence is interdependence, right? We need to know how to take care of ourselves, but then we bring that skill set to our the things that are important to us, our communities, our family, things that we are interdependent upon, right? We don't learn how to do that. And so we live in isolation now. That's why Dr. Vivek Murthy said there is an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. So, and again, also, we talked about those algorithms, right? Those algorithms keep us isolated, right? We're in an echo chamber of our own thoughts, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And we're interfacing with the world via a screen, right? So what I'm talking about is starting to form those real connections, and as a family, what are some economic choices can we make as a family, right? Can we source our food from someplace, or or if you're not living in the same community, but you can belong to co-ops, right? So now you're getting fresh produce, you're getting it locally, you're getting it you're sharing the cost among others. If we really want a different kind of world, we don't not only have to resist what is happening right now, we have to think about what does this new kind of existence look like, and work towards that. And I believe that it begins with community. I believe it starts with the family. I believe that you have to understand and be a part of your local government, because right now, with things that are going on, maybe it might be the local government that's going to save us from some things, potentially local and state, but you've got to be involved.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about collaboration, really. Like, how do we collaborate more effectively with each other as communities, as families, found families, families on the internet? Because the internet, I will say, does give you, or social media gives you a sense of false community. I don't know how many times I've listened to something or really resonated with somebody's post, but like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wanna say something, but I wanna get it right. So I don't even drop a comment, right? I just like it. And that's not really interacting, right? That's not really collaborating. Even when we do comment, how many times does that grow into actual action? So how are we creating new collaborations? How are we turning social media from just something stagnant where we're all, as you said, in echo chambers kind of saying something or yelling about something? And how do we make that something that really creates change in action? Like, I would love to hear from anybody who's on the chat. Like, has anybody ever seen anything grow out of like posts they've seen? Is this real community that we create in these social media networks? Are we really communicating? Are we using our skills in our families? Because uh oftentimes we talk about skills as physical things, like hardcore sets of skills, but there's also the skills in families of advice. And like, do we lean into different pieces of our generations and our friendships and kinships to get the information we need? Are there people who can coach us that we know, who can, because, and I'm saying coaching, exchanging, like, can we exchange knowledge and information? How often do we sit with friends and say, I just want to catch up with you and be with you to see how we can share resilience, and I can see how you're resilient and you can see how I'm resilient, and we could take tidbits like sometimes for independent workers, I don't know if you're finding this, I find myself just stagnant, like in the day, where I'm just stuck because my mind is racing with ideas and I'm not getting done what I need to get done. How many of us are body doubling because we're finding more times in the day where we're just kind of stuck and not moving forward? And when I say body doubling, is it might be I text you and I say to you, Melonya, I need to get some work done. You want to get some work done with me? From this time to this time, we're just going to work in silence and like, but it's holding you accountable to doing the thing that you need to do. And that's a type of community too. And that's a type of silent communication too, of caring and love. So I've thrown a bunch of things out there.
Yeah, I think building community is key. Some of the things that I would like to talk to my family about again, and I'm saying this to everybody within earshot, is again, I talk about gardens, and you're like, oh my God, what gardens? Yeah, fruit, vegetable gardens. Here's the thing: I was a vegetarian for 10 years. You can live on vegetables alone, and we just may have to in a world where if you do eat meat, the protections that our government used to have in place to make certain that our food sources were safe are no longer there. So you've got to figure out how you're going to be able to have safe food sources, right? And understand too, in terms of community, there's that kind of community, right? But there's other kind of communities that you can join. I've started to on YouTube. I've started following the American Medical Association on a weekly basis. They give updates in terms of what is going on because the CDC is no longer allowed to share information with us, and we're not communicating with the World Health Organization as well. So there are things that may be growing out outside of our country that we will not know about. The CDC is not sharing it, but the people on the front line, our doctors, are seeing things, right? And they're sharing what they're seeing. So if you haven't been paying attention, flu is really alarming this year. It's taking out more people than COVID has been in the past few years. I think 300,000 people have been hospitalized. 13,000 folks have died. Don't forget the flu, bird flu. Wait a minute, let me just finish. Bird flu is jumping from birds to cattle and to humans, right? There, veterinarians who have taken care of these sick animals have been testing positive for the antibody of the bird flu, right? I think one person or maybe a couple of people have died from that. So measles is growing in Texas. It started in Kansas, is moving to Texas. These are the things that you're not going to be able to get from our government agencies. So finding communities that provide you with sources of factual information is important.
Yeah, and the only thing I was gonna add is if you listen to the things that Melania's talking about, they are vaccine in some cases, vaccine preventable diseases that we
Right.
do have vaccines for. And so I as a nurse, I am concerned that there is someone in our highest health position right now that is not someone who I would consider health qualified to sit in that position, with any type of background in healthcare. And it is concerning that that particular person has some continue to be vaccine hesitancy and promotes the idea of vaccine hesitancy. Vaccines save lives. I know many people believe that the flu vaccine is not a helpful vaccine, but the flu vaccine does prevent the flu. And the way that that vaccine works is they target what they believe are going to be the most prevalent viruses. It doesn't mean that they always get it right, right? It's like trying to guess if you have, and I'm just throwing numbers here. These are not accurate numbers, but if you had 100 viruses, trying to pick out which one of those 100 are going to be the most prevalent to give a vaccine for. And so you target those. So let's say more people get exposed to like the one that perhaps wasn't in that vaccine profile, you might see more people end up with the flu, that version of the flu, because there's not just one singular version of the flu. That said, people can get the flu vaccine up until I think up until March even.
You can get it
You can
anytime.
get it whenever you want to. So if you feel like you were late on it or didn't get it, go get it. I would say people should be getting the flu vaccine. They should be getting the pneumonia vaccine if they're qualified for it and they have any risk factors for it, because pneumonia is prevalent and it is one of those things that's tied in with the flu. The COVID vaccine, you still have to get the COVID vaccine. If you're older, our age group, and shingles is going to be a risk for you, the shingles vaccine, right? We grew up with chickenpox without being able to get a vaccine for chickenpox. Anybody who got chickenpox knows that was not fucking fun. So why you would not take a vaccine to avoid diseases boggles my mind, not
Smallpox,
just as a nurse, but as a human being
right. I don't.
who's I just don't get it. And as someone who's taking care of patients with shingles, my nightmare would be to get shingles. It is horrible. It is painful. If there's something out there that prevents it, I'm right there getting it. I knew someone who was so afraid of the shingles that they begged their doctor to if they could have it earlier. So, but now we're at this point where there's a cadre in our society that's like, yeah, um, preventable diseases, vaccines, I don't know if I'm down for that. I would rather take my chances because the rugged, when we were back in the rugged times of pioneers, we didn't have vaccines. Yes, but a lot of people died on the Oregon Trail. Like, I know all the white people who played that game. Like, a lot of people died on the Oregon Trail. We don't want to go back that way. Like, that's not where we're headed. And since you mentioned vaccines, and I thought about our favorite person, RFK Jr. Jr. That's not his real name. I know I'm adding extra juniors there. But I will say I did find it interesting. He mentioned like health retreat, like camps, and immediately, like he talked about like getting rid of mental health medications and having people go to like wellness retreats. And I thought of those sanitariums that they used to have in the 30s and 40s, and I also thought of those medical health internment camps where they used to take people with disabilities and sterilize them and do horrible treatments to them. So I had all of these nightmare visions of like, oh, I see. We're not giving medication anymore. We're just putting people in places and we're not giving vaccines. But healthcare will get cheaper if a lot of people die from preventable diseases. I'll throw that out there. it does make me sad that there's a lot of misinformation about health and medicine and what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And which follows with GLP-1s, right? Like that's a relatively new treatment for um obesity and weight gain, right? And people are trying to use it just for like to not for significant weight loss, but like people won't get vaccines, right? Vaccines have been tested for at least 100 years now, but they're willing to take a weight loss medication that has not been tested as long. Like, mull on that. How superficial are we as people? Like,
That's
I'm willing to roll the die and take some and inject. I don't even like shots. Most Americans, most human beings don't like injections. And every single GLP commercial is like somebody getting a shot and they're like, I'm gonna lose some weight. And there's always someone who looks like thin too. I'm just to point that out. But like vaccines, which are also shots, like you have a whole group of people who are like, don't get that. They didn't test it enough. It's not gonna be good for you. It might prevent you from dying, but no, not tested enough. And nobody's asking about GLP-1s. And I mean, I'm not saying they're bad. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying there's no logic there with the American public.
Yeah, but I mean, people will inject themselves with Botox. Well, tox means toxin, that's
Yes.
poison, right? So they inject
And it's
themselves
good
with.
for some things. I don't know if you should just take it for cosmetic reasons just
I,
because
I know it's been used to treat migraines, right? And so
yes, it helps with migraines because
yeah,
it what it does is it uh
they kill something.
it doesn't kill anything. It paralyzes, the muscles in your face. So, for some people with migraines, they notice that so it's they notice that people migraine sufferers were having some relief because when they were injecting it in the face, they were hitting certain areas, which allowed some relief for certain types of migraines,
Yeah,
that are out there. And
yeah,
that's not the full scientific explanation. So before we entered this chat today, Melania said to me, I have a Thursday hangover. These are too angry, too early. And I thought to myself, wow, 9 a.m. is early. And as we entered, I was like, and do I have a hangover too? Just a sleepiness and over. But like at Friday, I always feel like I'm like, thank goodness it's Friday. And then I remember I work for myself and that doesn't matter because I'll still be working on Saturday and Sunday. So
yeah. Yeah, there's a psychological something to it. So you know what? I want to talk a little bit about communication in a second, but uh, because I think we're going to have to change our modes of communication. But when I talked about that family community, some of the subjects I think families need to have it is again, I start off with gardens. You got to secure your food. How are you going to save money? Everyone, there are some economic boycotts going on and being planned, but I think that each and every one of us should have our own economic boycott. I'm only buying what I need, and that is food and gas. That's it. The clothes that I have on, that's what I'm wearing.
I'm seeing a lot of quilted clothes in your future.
Yep, whatever. Okay,
Yeah, but these are okay. So
don't
like
hate me.
communities were made up of skill sets, right? So you might have someone who was a sewer, someone who's great at growing gardens, someone who is great at finances and figuring out
Yes.
how like because there is like a strategy to a family, right? But like most of us are very tiny families that don't like like I'm literally out here of one, right? So I'm like, what are who can I grab? Like I'm thinking of how to make my own family of skill sets and needed during the times that are coming.
Yeah.
I can grow stuff just so you know, Melania, in case we decide we have to resonate and have a farm someplace, a community. But it seems to not be for it's like plants, it's like house plants. It's air plants. Can you eat those? I'm sure you could eat anything.
So here's the thing about farming. I
You
follow this
can't eat
guy
anything.
called he's called Lead Farmer 73. He talks about creating
What
a
was it again?
Lead Farmer 73. He's on YouTube. He talks about creating a survival garden. And some of the things that he said, he said when you're, he said it doesn't take long for your garden, your vegetable gardens and fruit gardens and trees and nuts and all sorts of things. He's in Georgia, I think, but you can. My mother used to have a garden. I think it's a great thing to do with children. Get them off of those screens. Get out there and if you've got a porch, a balcony, you can do container gardens. You can do raised gardens. They don't always have to be in the ground, especially if you're renting. If you can find some sun and you've got some water, then you can grow some food. And you can grow food that, again, I grew up in a household where my mother canned food. She froze food. I still freeze food for the winter and put in an extra freezer that I have. I freeze vegetables. I go to the garden, the farmer's market, and I get those food. This year, I'm going to try to grow some of that food. But that being said, you can dry it, right? But all of these things that you can do. But then you might have so much abundance that you can share with others. You can share with your elderly neighbors. You can share with families. You can sell that.
And maybe you can find other neighbors or friends who are growing something different in
And
abundance that you don't have,
right,
or bees, right? Like I know someone whose wife has bees, right? So maybe you have chives and they have bees and there's a trade, or maybe you have lavender. Like think also about herbs that might be soothing and healing in the times to come, right? So you might need an herb garden for seasoning and for teas, like making your own teas and doing those types of things. We're going deep holistic. We're about to do
well,
like resonating, like relaxation, resilience. Like let's do a body mapping right now. I
well,
feel good. I
well,
entered a little tired.
You know
We
what?
talked herbs.
And we were talking this week, about we've been texting back and forth, and just in terms of our mindsets. And if I have a hangover this morning, I shouldn't because I'm not supposed to be drinking. Okay. So with that being said, you know where my head is
Does
at.
anybody know the cure for a hangover?
Don't
Pop it in the
drink.
chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, I think it's ginger. Ginger and lemon. Or is it maybe it's the hair of the dog that bit you, as my
Yeah.
dog shakes
Well,
in the background.
well,
Like, so you should just wake up and this is not my advice as a nurse. Just wake up and drink more or have more of what you had. No, don't do
no, but
that. My addiction is coffee.
no, but these are the things that, again, that we can do. And I think that is really important, again, for us to get off the screen. Get your kids out there if you have children. Help teach them how to grow their own food. Help them to have a connection to the soil. Indigenous people throughout this world understand the connection between the human and their environment. And they have a respect for their environment because they understand that they get the air, the water, and the food from this planet, right? And so if we can start instilling those belief systems and those values in our children, they're going to have a bigger understanding as to why they are going to continue to have to fight to save this planet.
I wonder how many people would live in a different way if there was the possibility and avenues of doing this, right? Like, I wonder how many people would love to live on a hobby farm or in a hobby community or like the Amish do, if there was a pathway to doing this. I know you and I have talked about how there's a lot of people on social media who talk about pathways to hobby farming and gardening and living a different lifestyle that embraces piece is more of nature. But a lot of times the barrier is the financial piece and the work piece, right? Like if you're living in the city, it almost feels how am I going to have a garden if I don't have a place to have a garden? Are there
Container.
ways? Yes. So you've
Container.
actually been telling container gardens can be done
Yes.
inside. You can, if you have any type of balcony or window, you can have window gardens. And there are things that you can grow in window gardens that can be helpful and sustainable, and reduce your cost of food expenditure. Because I'm going to say, if you're in the city, you probably can't grow everything yourself inside just because of the size maybe of your space or whatever, but you might be able to grow some things that you would have had to pay for to reduce your cost. And maybe if you grow enough of it, maybe you can have your own little collaborative building. I would love to see apartment exchanges of like, I grew the tomatoes, you grew the chives.
Mhm.
What are you growing over here? You're growing, I don't know, what other thing? Kale. Like, can you grow kale in New York? I think you
Oh,
can,
yeah.
right? But
Oh,
it
yeah.
requires like you could grow anything really with the proper, like we have shaped the world in our image in such ways that we have like indoor lighting, we have nets, we have things. All of these are expensive or could be expenses. But we have all these ways to grow stuff. But then thinking about it another way, like, could you get together with people in your building as a way to like even open up community? Hey, let's have a community garden. Because did
Right.
you see the price of eggs? Yeah, we can't have chickens, but maybe we can grow all of these other things if we each decide to own a piece of the apartment farm. This is probably somebody else's idea, though I feel like I just made it up right now. If anybody does it, I want to hear about the apartment farm, because you said to me, and I said, it's too cold to start farming. And you were like, now is the time. Go get your springlings in there. And so, if people want to go and do apartment farms, if you have co-ops, right, that you belong to a co-op community, think about like, could the co-op have a farming collaborative, like where people volunteer to grow different pieces of what you're going to share and what you're going to give back to community? This is how we're going to be able to make it through healthy.
Yeah.
I won't even talk about where you're going to plant your stuff in, because yeah, I know I've had a lot of thoughts myself on like, is plastic okay if you have plastic containers that you want to grow in? And a lot of stuff, if you buy seedlings, it comes in plastic, right? But like for the purposes of this, growing is better than not growing at all. So
Yeah.
I would say some people would disagree, but I'm going to say starting however you start is better than not starting.
And here's the other thing too, and I think you've laid out some brilliant things. You've taken this and you've even expanded it even more so. I think you may say to yourself, well, who has the time to do this? We can, if you can remember back to COVID and supply chain breakdowns and the things that we couldn't get. It was amazing sometimes to walk into a store and see empty shelves because that
The
was the reality.
I had someone send me a text message. What was the safe number of toilet paper tissue sheets that would be okay to prevent E. coli as a nurse, right? And they were like, "Do you think I could do it with 3 sheets?" I was like, "I don't know. It depends on you poop, right?" Like that's like a test and go. Like, but things were at a you know,
And food might look like that too, okay? Because stop to think. We have farmers who have depended upon uh, migrant.
subsidies. Well, subsidies
Well,
too.
we haven't even gotten to that yet,
Yeah,
right?
well,
But we've got farmers who have used undocumented immigrants to farm and to harvest. Well, if they're not being hauled away, they're afraid to show up for work, which means that food is not being able to be picked. It's rotting in the fields, right? We get a lot of our produce from Mexico, where we're picking a fight with them and throwing tariffs or threatening to show tariffs on them. And if they put tariffs on us, right, but those tariffs are going to mean that we're going to pay more
And I just want to say we're on a pause with the Mexico Canada thing right now, but it's just a pause. It's not, I don't think anything was like formally decided. I think they kind of just delayed the tariff discussion with Mexico and Canada. There are tariffs out there with other countries that are going to start hitting. I saw something, and I don't remember where I saw it. Melonya, maybe you saw this too, where Africa was saying like, and this has to do with the USAID piece. If we're not going to be global citizens, then why should they kind of be supporting us through a lot of our metals, right? And our mining things that we use in technology come from Africa. So there was, there is this thought in and I'll say the US maybe, and it's that Africa is just images of people starving and that they don't have resources and that they don't have something that we need, and that is false, right? We're global citizens. We are all global citizens. We should be helping each other. So I do think you're absolutely right. Not only food shortages, but the potential to also have technology increase in price because we're not able to get what's needed to build those types of technology. And so how can we start to, as people who we may think we have no control in these times of we're of misinformation, and it almost feels like something's changing every day. We may think we have no control, but how do we lean into our local communities and our friendships and kinships to start to create those support systems? How do we say to each other, hey, this is the block that we live in or live on? How do we get together, and how do I know my neighbor better so that I'm not fearful? Because a part of this is also the fear. If we're afraid of our neighbors, then we won't collaborate and communicate with them to say, like, hey, did you see that thing, that report? No, I didn't see that. My algorithm's different, but here's what I did see, and here's who I did talk to. And they're in the town council and they told me whatever, and this is the truth. Like, a lot of us don't have conversations like that. And so this might be the time for us to move from the very capitalistic piece, which is like, I got to go to work every day. I got to put 16, I got to put 8, 12, 16, 20 hours into my job. I have nothing left. I'm exhausted. I don't have time to talk to my neighbor because I'm very tired. To, you know what? I need to make a relationship with my neighbor because it might be the thing that saves my life, right? It might be the ability to knock on my neighbor's door and say, hey, do you have a cup of milk that I can borrow and I'll give you an egg, right? We have to maybe think about what does it look like to return to those types of relationships with neighbors where we're sharing and we're trusting them versus I don't know who that neighbor is and they're very noisy and I don't like them. Now we're going to need to lean into our community even more. Instead of closing our doors and being afraid, we perhaps need to open up our, because there's a reason why we chose to live in the communities we live in. And even if you didn't want to live there, you're there. So how are we going to make the best of it? Because we're going to have to make the best of it.
Yeah.
Personally, I want to move to a farm someplace. Who wants to do it? Let's go. We'll
You
just
know,
buy a big piece of land.
and I think
Anything
I
about
think
farming.
there's that. I think there is, but again, we also have to. I'm gonna spin off a little bit, because I was sharing with you. I texted you yesterday, that I have been seeing images on YouTube about mudslides and massive floods in California.
Mm.
And I noticed that wasn't seeing them, pop up in news
And
feed
in Kentucky too. I
in
saw that
Kentucky
there's
too, right?
been issues in
I,
Kentucky.
I noticed that those things would headline, right? I mean, news feeds, right? But they're not anymore. And also understand again, one of our protections in terms of
Do
being
they
able.
even have FEMA if it was in the headlines?
But
I don't
if it
think
would,
I'd hope.
even with FEMA, but the national weather, whatever is NOAA, But the information that warns us about storms and floods and things of that nature has, to some extent, been silenced because this administration does not want folks to understand that climate change is real, right? And so these stories are not
Why
being.
are you trying to trick the people? Okay, climate change is not real. This
You know
is
who
all
knows?
just decided by God.
You know who knows climate change is real? The insurance companies.
Oh, yeah, because 'cause they've started to draw back on,
Yes,
their insurance claims, right?
they know.
I wish I owned an insurance company and I could get people to just, like, give me money just in case something bad happens. Like, what a deal, right? Like, that's fantastic until the bad stuff happens, which is what's happening now. They're
Until
losing so much money because there's so many natural disasters, people are sicker, like, it's just amazing how like how the insurance companies are very like, "Oh goodness, we're losing a lot of money." But they're billion dollar companies. So I feel bad for them, but not
I
really.
don't feel bad for them. I don't feel bad for them. I mean, but like I said, they do. They do know that there is climate change. They do. They absolutely do
Yeah, because you
know
get
that.
that notice you live in an area that no longer will be covered with
As
fire insurance
as
or
people in Florida,
flood insurance. California probably has the fire insurance thing where they're not gonna do
right?
if there's a
Yeah,
fire, and which is an interesting concept because fires actually are one of the prevalent ways that people lose their houses with heat and all the electrical wiring and up the and it like the US News, I think it was US News, had an entire cover about like how house fires were last year was one of the most, pressing issues when it came to things that people would encounter. I almost had a house fire the other day with a fireplace because I was being silly and I had a napkin and I was like, I'm gonna throw it in the fireplace. And the wind, because we're having some wind, came it it was comically unfunny. But in that moment and the cat just watched it all. Like she just stared at me like this idiot just threw a very light napkin into the fireplace for no reason. And she just sat looking like this is how we go.
mhm,
The dog was not. He was very anxious when it all happened.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You should not live alone. Anyway, you
I
need to.
don't live along. I have a dog and I have a cat, and
You should be monitored at all times. I'm just saying. So let me hit a couple of more points in terms of those conversations with our family. So we should be talking about our food security. We should be talking about saving money because in the backdrop of
where do
everything
you recommend saving money? We're
don't.
not financial experts, by the way.
No, we're not. No, just
Yeah.
keep your money in your pockets, right? That's it. That's my
No,
advice.
it's you know what? It's funny you said that because during the Great Depression, because blacks were not allowed to put money into white banks, we actually lost less money because it wasn't in white banks. It was in your pocket. It was in your mattress. So we had, but it didn't really matter because where can you spend your money if they won't let you spend your money? But we have money. We have trillions of dollars. I'm not saying put your money in your pocket though. I'm saying like find some place where you can maybe put it safe. Maybe
Yeah.
have a couple of dollars in your pocket.
Yeah, but also in the backdrop of all of this, what folks really are not paying attention to is that our country is in a decline economically and compared to other countries, and we're going to feel that pain. So we need to figure out how to protect what money we have because the debt that we are growing, that bill is going to come due one day where other countries are going to say, we want our money. We don't trust, you're no longer stable. We don't trust you. We want our money. And that is going to cause a collapse in not in just the United States, but other places as well. You got to be prepared for that as well.
Or
Education.
we could just not pay it, right?
Oh,
Like they could come a call in and like the debtors, we could just be like, I'm sorry, they're not here.
yeah, yeah,
Click.
yeah.
The US is not here when they call,
I'm
right?
sorry.
They come
No,
a call in.
you're
I'm
wrong.
sorry, you have the wrong number.
Wrong number.
How
right?
much do we owe you? 96 trillion? No,
I
I'm sorry.
I'm
She
sorry, I
moved.
don't know, I don't
Lady
speak
Liberty, she's
I don't
no longer in the
whatever language
resident.
you're speaking, I don't understand it.
I know what you're
But
saying.
these are the things that you have to think about. The other thing I think families and communities have to think about is education, right?
Yes.
Yes, you may go to a public school. Do not depend on them educating your children, right? So
Particularly if you have education needs. 504 plans, there's a lot of discussion what will happen with some of the education plans that are in place for children who need them to accommodate for learning disabilities and physical disabilities. Some of that is out there on the discussion board and might be changing, which I find fascinating because one of the efficiency leaders, right, um, Elon, like, he actually has a bit of neurospiciness, so it's interesting to see him not weighing in on that piece. But he's rich enough that he would never have probably needed to have to use an access plan, for educational learning. So, yeah, so far we've talked about
what
food, we've talked about, education,
let
finances.
me just say one more thing about education. When we're talking about community, right? And I'm going to be doing some research on this, creating community educations, like community weekend schools, right? What could that look like? What are spaces that you can have those kinds of programs? Libraries are one, right? They have always been a gold mine in our communities, right? And pay attention when if libraries begin to close, because that also means that they
They're
don't want you
publicly
to have
funded.
they don't
Usually,
want
yeah.
have information, but community centers or whatever. But you're going to have to augment your child's education, and so these are the things that families need to think about. Whether it is online or whether
Online, get to know your neighbors, rotate houses,
right,
find this is our chance. We complain about loneliness in the US and worldwide, but sometimes a driver to get out of your silo and your box is need, right? Like the need to address these things that might be lacking might open us up to greater spaces and greater belonging. So I'm trying, like, we don't want to be downers, right? We're
I
not
think this is
we're just
uplifting. It's
what?
giving us power.
No, this is empowering, right? So don't think of this as like, oh my gosh, one more thing to worry about. This is empowering because when you know, then you're prepared, and it's not like catastrophic. Oh, nobody knew this. I didn't know this was going to happen. So we want to empower you by educating you and preparing you for these are some things that might happen. And this is the time more than ever to lean into community. I don't like people. I say that to you all the time. I don't like people, right? But I'm gonna have to get out of my box and be like, who are my neighbors? I love it. Who can I trust? Right? Like, is it my most for anyone who lives in the town of Merchantville, I'm going to give a shout out to an obnoxious house on Maple Ave. Maybe it is not the Maple Ave house in Merchantville. That's a tongue in cheek call out to that person. Maybe that's not my neighbor, but maybe the neighbor that is my neighbor is the guy who showed up the other day and was like, let me tell you about this guy I love who's anti government. And I was like, who are you? I've never met this neighbor before. And he said, I'm empowered because I see what's going on in the world and I wanted to go around to my neighbors and make sure they were informed. I was like, ooh, neighbors getting out here talking to neighbors. I saw something on Instagram where older gentleman had a party and invited all his neighbors. Now is the time for us to do this. Let's show that we are strong as communities, that we are strong as
Can I
communities.
just say one more thing?
Maybe.
Let me just say this too, because you talked about communication. We're going to have to take these conversations offline because we
Yes.
are being surveilled. And if you, I mean, I'm just looking at my Facebook, right? I'm just looking at now, I no longer see information from.
Stop making me more nervous.
I'm not saying
You mean every time the screen kind of flickers, maybe
no,
someone's watching
no,
me? No?
no,
Okay.
no. What I'm saying is that you used to get feeds from the people, your friends, and your friends,
Yeah.
right? I don't see those anymore. What I see is this other generic stuff, right? But I have to go
My
into.
feed gets restricted. For anyone watching, I've gotten notices from I'm not gonna say, well, we all know where the notice came from, but it's like what you posted might not have we have restricted it for the safety of some of our members. Like I don't think any children follow me, to be honest. Like, and I always say whether my content is like not appropriate for the for younglings. I think everything is, but I've been restricted a few times where it's like it's going to show nowhere.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And
and
so,
I didn't post anything
but so,
really like controversial.
understand, because the folks who were sitting on that podium behind of the president during the inauguration are tech people, right? And so everything is monitored. And I've been screaming about this all along. And don't think AI is your friend. It's taking your information and it's learning from you, and they're learning what you're investigating. Okay.
That's why I love it. I feel like a small little chaos demon when I talk with AI, and I'm like, AI, what do you think about the following? It's just dropping pearls with my AI.
One other thing, and I've talked to you about Microsoft that has embedded things into it to be able to look at your screen, take screenshots. It's called Microsoft Recall. Every 10
Okay.
seconds, it's taking screenshots of your screens. You got Copilot embedded in it. So you got a phone that tracks you everywhere. So as we go through life and as things become more restrictive, leave your phones at home.
That's why I'm probably hard to reach because, like, I put my phone somewhere and then I forget about it.
You know what? I'm not even talking to you. I'm talking to the American people. See, because she's just, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, she needs to be monitored all the time.
I already am. You just told me Copilot
Everybody,
and
yes, you are.
Google,
But hear me when
everybody's
I talk now.
monitoring
When
me.
I talk,
Listen, this hair is big. You think I go out and it's not monitored? My favorite is when people are like, "Where are you from?" Right? I'm like, "It's obvious where I'm from." Here. No.
but I'm saying, and if you're really having a real conversation, turn off your speakers. I got Alexa over there, and sometimes a
I
few.
like it when she weighs in and
Yeah,
she's like, "No, you can't buy that at Amazon." Like,
no,
I'm not trying to buy
yeah,
anything.
but you know what I don't like is sometimes when I see that blue light on and I haven't called her. Okay.
See, now we've gone from communication to like how we were gonna be resilient with our families to now we're deep diving into conspiracy.
No,
And it's
it's not. No, it's not. No,
not
it's not
conspiracy,
conspiracy. Don't.
but
I'm not a conspiracist, but I'm saying that in the world to come, you have to be careful as to what is tracking you.
uh-oh,
Oh,
we got
go ahead,
somebody in
Miss
the chat.
Dr. Harry.
Harry
Y'all have two
Dr.
different
Harry
my
Petaway has come
Mhm.
into the chat. Oh, yeah.
Team Melania when it comes to
We
AI.
have
Thank
two.
you, Dr. Harry. Yes, yes,
Well,
yes.
that's because listen,
It's,
and the
it's
sadness
but
begins.
here's the other thing too, and I also understand this as a
I
family
I
and as
just wanna say I've also been scammed a couple of times doing ridiculous things on the internet, so no one should trust me when I talk about, like, anything technology watching you, because like I say to you all the time, a good algorithm for selling me something will definitely get me. Is it about plants? Are they gonna grow bigger? Is it some weird oil? Yes, definitely. Will it never arrive? Yes, definitely. Like I'm open to is it a blue light on my phone all the time in the middle? Who's watching me? I'm like, all right, AI, come on. That shouldn't is I live with many people in this house, but sometimes I feel like my best friend is the little AI, and you tell me it's not.
and that's what they want you to do. That's
They
what they
do.
want you to do. And stop to also think about this.
It's so
If,
friendly. I
if,
don't even realize it's gonna murder me.
right. If knowledge is power, how powerful is Elon Musk right now? If information is power, how powerful is he? He has all of our information. And that information will
Well, he
be
was supposed to give it back.
that information will
I
be
mean,
used
don't you think
against
he
us.
will? I mean, didn't they say no? No, actually, they said no, and then they said yes. I think the
Doesn't
latest thing
matter.
was he's
But
allowed to go back to no.
that horse is out the gate, okay?
It's just
Right?
well, once you how do you unsee something? That's what I wondered. I was like, how do you even if they were in there and then they left, like, how do you unsee what you saw?
No,
Like, that would be me going into your personal records, right? Like, I'm taking care like, whatever, and I see something, and I'm like, I can't forget what I saw. I saw it already.
but when we talk about communication and when we talk about AI, right? Also understand that they're going to employ it in as many ways as possible, right? So that they can cut people from jobs. That's another reason why you have to be in community and why you have to have support systems. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs.
Well, and I just want to say that AI, though it is smart, and it is very good at processing large sets of information, it is not a critical thinker in the way that human beings critically think about things. It is not quite creative. It is able to mimic how we create poetry and writing, but it is not truly creative. Because if you really start to like get into deep conversations with AI, it always has ways that it can be improved upon, right? And that's like kind of we're training it every day like a toddler. But right now the way that it is, I would be very nervous if regulatory bodies turned over the entire job of looking at regulatory practice or screening for things. Even when we see it looking at like medical algorithms or patient care records, it is very rigid in its thought processes because it truly is whatever we've programmed it with at this point. So I know that is coming, and many people have lost jobs already to AI. But I think we have this false sense that it is a better replacement for human beings, and it's not. I think that if we were smart, we would see it as an adjunct to expanding our minds to process information in a faster way, and we're kind of managing sort of how it goes out there and kind of helps us.
I'm not
It
giving it my information. I'm not. I barely use Chat GPT now. I'm
Oh my
like,
god.
I'm not. I'm not going to lose my brain cells. And families need to have those kind of conversations because these AIs are being implanted in things that our children are going to interface with. They are going to become less critical thinkers, and we're over our time.
We are. We are. And I agree with you to a point, but not quite. Um, yeah, to a
I
point.
mean, I still use a little bit, okay. But then again,
I wish I could have a robot like Elon Musk showed up with, and it would just talk to me.
Okay, all right. So that's empty Fridays, y'all.
That might have been my PDA showing up a little bit at the end there, just to see you tweak a little bit on that robot.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
It has been a pleasure. We'll be here next Friday. Don't forget, Friday, February the 28th is an economic blackout. You ain't buying nothing. We're not
We're
buying
not buying
gas.
nothing,
We're
and
not
this is
going to the
free. So you
store.
can yes, you can sit with us and plan how you're not gonna buy anything,
Yeah.
and how you are also going to just if you go to a store, you have to just return things all
Oh,
day long.
and
All
if you're going to buy
yeah,
local, support small businesses,
yes, if
right?
you or go see a coach. No.
Goodbye. Goodbye,
Thanks for
y'all. See you
joining
next
us on
week.
MT Fridays. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more insightful discussions every Friday. Remember, the brain drain stops here, so keep the conversation going by connecting with us on social media or visiting our website. Until next time, stay curious and keep filling your mind with knowledge. See you next week, Friday, on MT Fridays.